My name is James Lanyon. I'm Executive Vice President Material. I oversee our strategy and innovation program. I was asked whether I'd be interested in hosting this panel. When I saw the title, I was like, absolutely. I love this topic, the balance of hype and performance. Before we get into it, I was going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves. We have a great cross-section of different industries and a lot of really interesting experts. So, Jill, do you want to start out?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Jill Lyons. I am Chief Operating Officer at Maximum Effort. We are an entertainment company across brand, sports, film, and TV, and perhaps most famous for our co-founder, Ryan Reynolds.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. I'm Celeste Lee. I'm a creative lead at Netflix. I work specifically on the live experiences team, so all of our live events and immersive attractions.
Hi, I'm Justin Kassan. I'm the CMO at Honeylove. We sell bras and shapewear.
My name is Jake Avdiev. I work on Amazon on the grocery business, specifically consumer marketing and strategy, and my background is in CPG as well as tech.
So as everybody can see, we have this great panel of diverse perspectives from across different industries. But I think we're all kind of unified by a moment in time. I think of hype as kind of an energy, right? If you think about it, there's these moments where everybody gets so excited and everybody's still trying to kind of figure out AI. And we're just getting over several other sort of innovation epics that have affected how we do. But it is universal that we'll all be kind of caught up in that moment. And so I was going to have the panel just talk high level. When we think about hype and performance, right? How do we, each of you, think about capturing that energy in the moment where everybody's really excited and everybody's talking about something, even though the reality is you may have to divert some resources or some time and attention, and you always feel that sort of tug against the bottom line results that your teams have to deliver. So I was hoping each of you all might talk a little bit about that, and then we can open up the conversation after. Jill, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think hype and performance are two great words. I think that, you have to have both, right? And the balance is going to depend on the story that you're telling, the brand that you have, the product that you have, and also the stage at storytelling which you're at, right? And so certainly you've got to focus on both. And I think a lot of brands, and even if you talk as an individual, like you over-focus on one and under-focus on the other. It's a constant balancing game. So both are equally important.
I'll say we're just going to go down the row, right? That's fine. Okay.
How about it?
I would say for me, on the immersive experience and location-based entertainment side, like our goal is to get butts in seats, right? So there's a level of wanting to drive hype around if there's like a particular IP, and in our case, that is having some level of like cultural relevance. We want to jump on that and be able to provide an offering that's like reflective of that current cultural hype moment. But from like a performance side of things, we want to make sure that we can actually like get folks to have an opportunity that's going to resonate with them directly. So I think it's like a balance of trying to find those opportunities, react as quickly as possible because those hype moments are pretty fleeting, and then be able to, kind of land it from a long-term perspective.
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of one of the largest hype cycles of my career, especially in D2C. The AI boom the wave is huge and it's building, and it's really hard to know as a brand which types of hype or tools to chase and which are going to lead to durable performance and which are just hype. So it's the Wild West a bit right now. I think we all have, hear about dozens, if not hundreds of tools that come out that potentially are supposed to improve our bottom line or save us X amount of time in our day or help us assist, not replace certain jobs functions. And like that is a constant barrage of hype that we're getting every day. And it's a struggle to parse like what is going to lead to performance and not. So yeah, I don't actually have a perfect answer, but I think we're thinking about it every day, and I use AI like pretty much constantly in my personal life. So I think that we're at the Wild West right now, so it's really hard to say which are going to survive.
Agree with everything that was said. I would say it's very difficult to come in too late, but then you also don't necessarily want to come in too early, because too late, then you're risking that you're kind of past the trend line, let's say, and then too early, the trends of flash in the pan, and then you don't necessarily benefit from that, and you kind of quote unquote waste resources. And so tests and learns are a great way to just come in, pilot something, move quickly, and then figure out if it is working, then you kind of expand and elaborate on that. But it's a massive give and take, and there are no right or wrong answers. But I would say if you are leaning on brand or hype marketing, you should really try and tie it to something that's relevant to the brand, like some kind of news, a product launch, or an innovation, because then at least that relevance brings authenticity, versus a lot of brands just try and jump on the hype train just because, and consumers are smart. They'll see through that inauthenticity.
I actually really like that idea of the hype train. And I think about that, and I think about how much technology plays a role in a lot of what we talk about these days. Have you experienced, any of y'all, a moment where you're like, oh, we overdid that? Like there's a specific instance where you're like, you kind of overcorrected towards technology or made certain assumptions about that moment that you were in, where you're like, maybe we need to pull it back a little bit. Maybe we were a little early in. Do you guys have any experience with that?
I can jump in quickly. We were actually just talking about this earlier, but I'm in the grocery space, and there's this technology. It's called Just Walk Out. Some of you might know, you kind of walk into a store, you pick something up, and then you walk out, and then you don't have to actually check out and go through that experience. And in many ways, that is cutting edge. That's something that's unique, and it solves a need for consumers, but at what cost essentially becomes the question. And sometimes you jump in, and consumers might not be ready for that level of cutting edge technology yet. However, in this particular case, you're probably starting to see that Just Walk Out technology licensed to other partners like Hudson News, or at the airport or in stadiums, and that's solving a different need of convenience that's actually more specific versus, let's say, groceries in the moment. And so sometimes you jump in for the sake of bringing some kind of tech to life, and then other times you have to realize when it might be a bridge too far, take a step back, and then repivot and shift that technology to something else that might work for the future. So that's just one example.
Yeah, and I can jump in and add that, change is really hard as humans. We don't like it. But internally, operationally, I think about, evolution versus mutation, right? You don't want to mutate because people react negatively to mutation, but evolution feels good. Evolution feels like, okay, we were here, we got to here, I'm bringing you with me, right? And so if you've got kind of the vision, which is often the hype, and the reality, you want to make sure that the vision is pulling up the reality, not the opposite, right? And then that's the danger when you go too far out, like you're saying, the reality kind of pulls down the vision, and it's like, oh, well, that was a waste of money, a waste of time, a waste of effort, etc. So, balancing that difference is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I have, over the course of many years, jumped on various types of tools and products that had promised the world and that you thought they were going to pan out and didn't, live up to that hype. I think it's a balance. You have to jump into enough to know what is going to make a difference, but it's also about kind of cutting your losses when you realize it's not living up to the hype that you thought, and not emotionally, over-indexing on trying to make it work when the signals are maybe this was a mistake. So it's also a lot about how you react versus how you jump in as well.
We talk about hype, and it's almost always about technology and innovation, but the reality is that's just one part of it. And I think about culture, particularly after last night. I don't know if you guys saw, Timothée Chalamet apparently got roasted pretty good at the Oscars last night. But culture in entertainment is a really key part of it too. And when I was talking, both Celeste and Jill as well, this whole notion of like, how do we go and think about harnessing a lot of that energy in the hype around entertainment, around cultural buzz. And I thought it was so great. I was actually going to ask y'all to talk about that a little bit because I know that's a big part of your work is like capturing that moment, turning it into something real and doing it like responsibly, not just kind of sticking your finger in the air because you have to learn the lessons the hard way and get good. And I wouldn't say systematizing, but maybe like getting comfortable harnessing those moments as they come. Does that make sense? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So with my side of work, our focus is really being able to provide experiences for our fans, right? Our fans of our shows, our fans of our films. And essentially we're creating new content in a way that a lot of our guests are not usually familiar with. They're used to Netflix as a platform. So with the experiences, it's a massive sort of like brand stewardship opportunity. I think for me, as the creative lead on marketing, my responsibility is to ensure that I'm communicating to our guests in an authentic way. And I think to do that, I spend a lot of time being curious. While I think there's like a certain level of tacit knowledge and experience that we bring to the role, I think it's really important for creatives and for marketers and for essentially all industries to approach with, you don't probably have all of the answers, so it's great to start with from a place of curiosity and try to do a little bit of investigation of what do people actually want, what is motivating someone to either buy the product or show up to the experience. So I spend a lot of time asking questions. I think there's like a data side of it, of course, where it's like we do a deep dive into consumer insights and whatnot, but a lot of the quantitative stuff is like half of the battle. And I think we have to do a lot more of that like cultural deep dive. I'll keep this kind of brief, but like essentially for us, that can start from a place of like social listening to also just like being on the ground, interacting with people, communicating with people directly to get like a true sense and understanding of like what is driving someone to want something, to participate in our experiences. So I think going from a place of assuming you don't have all of the answers, and as that is kind of like a step one, and then kind of peeling back the onion from there, I think helps to differentiate between, I think once you get down to the core of something, it stems away a little bit from hype, and then you can get a little bit deeper into like really driving long-term sort of conversions and more of like a sustainable model where people keep coming back.
Yeah, I think the authenticity I would agree with 100%, especially in this world where, and I hope I can swear here, but my one of my old bosses would always say, well, cream rises, but shit floats, right? And there's a lot of shit, right? That's a lot of the AI slop and all of that kind of stuff that is being talked about. At Maximum Effort, we think about brands as talent, right? And so in the same way that you would cast a movie, you're casting the brand. And there's stories that brands can tell, and there's stories that they can't tell, right? And we're always trying to chase that, like, what is that one story that the brand can tell? Where is the role for them to participate and play? And then, you know, being culture first means that you chase the culture moment first. This thing is happening. This thing is coming up. This is hot in the culture, or, you know, not in the trend report because that's already happened, but is going to be something that people are talking about. And then how do we place the right brand, the right message, the right story in that spot? I mean, we were just talking, my friend Alicia and I were talking about Bridgerton yesterday and how this like whole ecosystem and world has been formed. This whole thing that was not there before is now this like living, breathing that Max Effort has nothing to do with, but I'm just giving you your flowers because we love it.
I'm glad you guys are fans.
Well, and you know, that's such a good point because a lot of it is about perception. I even remember when House of Cards was being touted as like a quantitative result, even though it turned out it wasn't that thing. The hype around big data was very palpable at the time. And they're like, oh, we ran the numbers and we came up with this idea about doing a political thriller. It turns out the BBC had already done it. But the hype around big data and quantitative results was real at the time. And I think about how perception and the momentum behind an idea actually shapes how it's perceived as a value. And Justin, you were part of Dollar Shave Club. You've actually worked in several exits, some of which got close to, I think, $1 billion. And I would posit a theory that part of that was the value of the company, and part of it was the sentiment or the energy around it at the time. And I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about how that balanced and what that felt like.
No, 100%. I think during those years in the past, when we were in it, we would attribute all of the value to the amazing company that we built and the fundamentals. But I think in hindsight, seeing the general landscape of the D2C kind of boom at that time, there was a lot of hype, and that was a huge part of it. And I think those disruptor companies, the bigger brands, didn't want to be left behind. There was something new, interesting. The hype was huge around it. But in hindsight, I think a lot of those fundamental thoughts, like all the things back then when I thought I was a genius, realized, wait, I wasn't actually so smart. And a lot of those concepts aren't actually panning out in the longer view. It was a lot of hype that fueled those exits. And they were good, but so I think now as like marketers, I'm learning in the process of learning how to kind of marry all this performance marketing concepts and break down the barriers to the brand side and make sure that is robust. Because if you don't have that foundation and it's all just numbers and going up to the right, that's not necessarily gonna always sustain with those strategies. I think that's what we've learned from that kind of that hype cycle, if you will.
And some of it's like learning to make the intangible tangible, right? I actually deal with this a lot when over time, particularly with the advent of performance marketing over the last 10 to 15 years, where they're like, well, if I can't see it, I don't want to talk about it. The reality is people aren't transactions. Like that is just a visual manifestation of what you managed to achieve with them. And the reality is creating an enduring relationship, particularly one that has a difference on the category, oftentimes means turning that sort of intangible into something that can be measured. Is that something y'all deal with on a daily basis?
Oh yeah, and in trying to sell in or partner on ideas and concepts, right? It's like, okay, you've got to, we recognize as like the agency or the brand that, on the brand side, you've got to sell into your boss's boss, perhaps the board, perhaps, validate the budget. And, it's very appealing to say, well, yeah, I can tell you exactly how many impressions this is going to get, and here's the ROI, and here's the, cost per click, and here's the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you're right. But, and also, it doesn't make me buy Tide over the, whatever, grocery store brand detergent. That only comes from an irrational brand love of like, oh wait, I remember my mom used Tide, right? Like there's something that makes you be irrational about your love for that thing, whether it's a show like Bridgerton or, a product, or going to the Amazon Fresh grocery store, which I loved, like, cause my kids would be like, it's the grocery store of the future. And so, what's that hook? And at the end of the day, it's story. And that's where the hype has to be balanced with the performance, right? You've got your underpinning of performance, and then you've got a hype tentpole that pulls up, and people have a place to land with the click or the call or the purchase, but that's down here. And I don't know, you've got to find a way to have those cream moments to like pop up.
So it's like the yin and the yang. They work together.
There you go. Yes. It's very holistic.
Cool. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I'll add to that. I think you articulated that so well of just like, while the performance, like, we can look at the data and see what's working, I think that has to start for something to work. It really starts with like, what is the brand value that we're providing for the first 3 seconds, 7 seconds that someone is coming across our ad, whether that's on digital or if it's on print or if it's IRL. We need that experience from start to finish to feel like something that you want to connect with. There's a variety of ways for that to happen, whether it's from just having really outstanding creative to having, a really excellent offer, or to providing a product, of course, that's like filling a specific need. I'll say for my side, there's kind of a balance of all three of those pillars where we, for Netflix House specifically, we created a brand where we provided or essentially created IRL entertainment that was like a brick and mortar permanent structure. So while there's a level of education to what Netflix House is, we also have to do that like service of reminding folks that Netflix in general is something that entertains you at home, and Netflix House is something that entertains you IRL. The way that we entertain you IRL, we have to be able to convey through, and essentially like the first 7 seconds of an ad, which is kind of challenging, but I think what we do is really try to lean into just the entertainment component of it, I guess, just to get folks sort of initially sort of interested in what we're doing. So, yeah.
On my end, I would just say the connective tissue is very important between brand and performance. And I tend to challenge brands or brand marketers to run tests and learns in performance-only markets, brand-only markets, and then combination markets. The combination markets will largely win out pretty much 100% of the time, because you need one to fuel the other. If you have a strong brand campaign, but it has nowhere to land, to the point earlier, is then you're not capturing the demand. So you have to generate demand, but if you don't capture it, then you've only done half the job. And then vice versa, if you're trying to capture demand where it doesn't necessarily exist, then that kind of your upside is limited there. And so I would say the connective tissue is very important. You try to, anytime you lead a brand campaign, have somewhere for it to land from a performance marketing standpoint, so that you actually do capture that demand.
I love that. In fact, I was going to go back, because one of the things we didn't talk about, but we should, is how hype, for lack of a better way of expressing it, has different meanings for different categories. I think we'd all agree, right? Some people, like Ryan Reynolds, are able to make their own. That's a luxury not all of us have. Some of us have to leverage it in different ways. For example, I would imagine Netflix, it's probably like at the speed of scroll. Well, that we just missed that. Let's move on to the next thing. But grocery is very different. Like, that's something we all grew up with. I hate to use the term low consideration, but it's a habitual category. And when I worked in shopper marketing, I wasn't aware of this until somebody showed it to me. And they have what's called the ring, which the people who shop the outer part of the grocery store, and they're usually very health-minded. And then they have the aisle, which are people who have a higher tolerance for processed or prepackaged foods and things like that. And I love the science behind it, but I also know that it creates a very different context. And so I was hoping maybe you could talk about, from your perspective, how innovation and the energy around it, and then with the thin margins that come with the grocery category, how you have to balance that interest in engaging something with knowing that you still have to deliver quarterly and annually as well.
It's a great question. I think you hit the nail on the head with the habitual piece, and that's something that's very interesting in the grocery realm, because you kind of have to break the habits. And so you're trying to get consumers to first purchase off cycle if they're already purchasing with you, or get them to shift their behavior away from an existing retailer. And so for us and with grocery, it's about capturing those moments, whether it's seasonal moments or cultural moments, and really coming in and bringing the relevance of grocery during that time frame. And so, game day snacking, for example, and working with the NFL or the NBA and partnering with Prime Video and figuring out a way to create bundles curated around snacking and hosting parties, as an example, or Thanksgiving, hosting family, or Friendsgiving, and then kind of connecting with chefs, creators, and coming up with recipes that are very relevant there. And then sometimes you kind of have to create buzz, think outside of the box a little bit. We actually worked recently with Audible on the Harry Potter launch last year of the new book, and created a recipe series tied to the Harry Potter world. And so that way you're kind of bringing a little bit of that brand piece, but then connecting it to the performance side to make sure that you have something that's a shoppable recipe that connects in, and there's your throughput. And so sometimes you create the hype, other times you just kind of capitalize on the moment.
That's great. Justin, I was going to ask you to talk about that as well. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask you if you had butterbeer in there. I was interested in trying it.
It's trademarked, so I don't think.
Got it.
But you're in D2C, right? And so in a way, your job is similar but different, I would imagine, in that you're trying to get people to choose an alternative when they may have a pre-established preference, right? Something they're used to. Is that accurate, or am I misinterpreting that?
Yeah, I think that the way that the marketing works now is that a lot of these algorithms are lasering in on people who have some type of propensity to buy your category already. So when we're our ads are in market, on the platforms, you have to assume that you are up against all your competitors within, inches on the newsfeed. So you have to tell that entire story very quickly, differentiate yourself very quickly, and make sure you're engineering your messaging to encapsulate so much in such a short amount of time. It's a challenge.
So I was just told we only have a few minutes left. This has gone pretty quickly. I really enjoyed talking with y'all. I had one question I wanted to ask each of y'all to talk about. You can tell I'm from Texas. I say y'all a lot. I was part of a team that used the Amazon Recognition API to go and do a lot of future of retail and future of restaurant engagement. And it turns out I grossly overshot the trajectory of consumer adoption of the technology. And fortunately, we didn't invest a lot of money in it, but we put a lot of time into it. And I bet you it's sitting in a box somewhere. We got it out. We work with it today. But I think about, like, if I could go back and tell my former self, right, James, do me a favor, take your foot off the accelerator pedal on that. Because I was leaning into a trend that I had misjudged. And I didn't know if y'all had examples with moments in time or moments in hype or trends where you go back and talk to your former self and say, hey, maybe don't lean in so hard on that one because it's going to take longer to play out. Do y'all have a moment where you kind of misjudged the trend line a little bit?
Well, I'll speak I came from a few career stops ago. I was at Epsilon, and that was 10, 15 years ago. And we were talking about this kind of world of performance at a time when very few people were talking about it. And even if you kind of look back at like the time there were digital agencies, right, versus just, everybody's digital now. And I think that, what you were just talking about with, sometimes people aren't ready for you, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you can't still get out there and tell your story. And I recently read Ina Garten's book. Any Ina Garten fans in here? Love her. And her book, her memoir is called Be Ready When the Luck Happens, or something like that. And I think sometimes it's like, and what you were just saying about Dollar Shave Club, right? It is hyped, but like you guys were also ready for it. And so sometimes it just takes a minute for the culture to keep up with you. It doesn't mean that you can't be at the forefront, but it does mean you might be getting a couple looks or pulling back on things. And I think that's totally fine.
I was just say that was a great answer. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
I'll say prior to my current role, I worked in music, and I remember we had leadership at the time was very excited about like NFTs, and we decided to like soft launch an NFT album. I won't say for who. And we dedicated a lot of time and resources and budget to make this happen. And as you can imagine, it did not necessarily perform as they had hoped. And I think largely it took us so much time to even just like get the NFT off the ground that it actually, like in the time it took to get off the ground, the hype kind of died down around it. And I think, Jill, something that you have mentioned that I think is really well said of like, if you don't time it properly and the community that you're trying to speak to introduce this new thing to is not prepared for it, you're kind of mutating as opposed to evolving. And I think in this instance, that was a good case of a mutation and not an evolution. Yeah.
How about you, Justin?
Yeah, I didn't buy any NFTs, thankfully.
Thank God.
I did bleach my hair probably too late in that hype cycle, but I think business-wise, I think that, there's a lot of little examples. I think one, maybe more interesting one was at Dollar Shave Club, we attempted to make a periodical, like a magazine, and we spent a lot of resources on it. We thought we had that like cultural impact, and I think in hindsight we weren't quite there where people wanted to read our musings in a article. So we did spend a lot of resources on that we then did kind of reel back in.
On my end, I would actually not tell myself to take my foot off the gas for a lot of these, because I think you learn more from your mistakes than a win, for example. And so I would still want to go through a lot of the quote unquote failures, like jumping on the bandwagon for Snapchat filters way after it was cool. Like there are many examples like that where you just have to take the chance, the risk, and then you learn why it did not pan out. So for me, I think those are more important to actually keep the foot on the pedal, learn, and then for next time, hopefully you don't repeat the same mistake, but then you'll come in with probably a different one.
Spoken like the client. I'm on the agency side, so we don't get that same permission. So in the last few minutes that we have, we talk about hype, but it really is about like capturing a moment in time and trend that will pay off, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. I think right now the one that I'm betting on is IRL. There's an undercurrent of cultural reversion to pre-mobile, pre-technical. A lot of gifts for kids this year were like, go outside, get a stomp rocket, get some sun, some vitamin D. Knowing that, that's the trend that I think is going to pay off. Is there a trend that each of y'all have your eye on, like that has a little hype building behind it? You think actually may have a little bit of a gold at the end of the rainbow?
I'll just second your trend. I led growth at Fabletics before this, and our in-store experiences, we had about 100 stores, and that was a huge growth driver for us. Both we saw that our digital was driving growth there, and we felt very confident that having those stores was driving growth on digital, and it was just a virtuous cycle there, and it was one of the fastest growing parts of the business.
I'll add to that. I sure hope IRL is a trend. I think people just want community, and I think that's why IRL is becoming more of like a trend in a weird way. I think we've lost a lot of third spaces, and while I think the nature of a brand developing a third space feels like kind of the antithesis of that, but I think just finding opportunities to like foster places for people to commune will hopefully be something that's more consistent throughout various industries.
Jill?
I'm gonna, whatever, my kids would do this and say yes, yes, yes to the IRL. I think the other thing is this idea. I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Like you've got for-profit companies and you've got non-profit companies, and then like in between, there's like there's B Corps and that kind of stuff. But how are we really thinking about organizing ourselves for collective good? I think more and more people are, holding brands accountable for their behavior, and like the responsibility, I think, is on all of us to build better organizations and companies that, we don't have to make all the money to then give the money away to the people who need the money. It's like we could just be in a more communal human relationship with each other. So,
And a cooperation versus competition.
there you go. 2 C's. Click, click.
How about you?
Very, very similar. I would say AI-generated content will have a boom, and it's coming. It's inevitable.
We'll have a what?
A boom.
Okay.
Like it's coming. It's inevitable. It's already here, and it will likely take over human-generated content for a while. Depends how long. We don't know. TBD. But then at some point during that boom, human-generated content will be sought after, and so I think that's actually going to be a trend that comes back around to where you almost have to prove.
I just saw Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about this on YouTube this morning, and his take, don't mean to interrupt, but to play off of that, is that his belief, he's like, I've been working in AI and machine learning and sciences well before generative AI came on the scene. And he said, my belief is it's going to hold the creator community accountable. Like that's his thesis, is that ultimately all of these tools, which you were flicking through all of this crummy content all the time, well, guess what? Like now we're going to have to up our game to be more engaged and more credible. So you're in good company with that opinion.
I fully agree, and I think it's ebb and flow, and hopefully we ebb back into great, really strong human-generated content.
So let's take the idea one more lap around the track. We have these beliefs about moments in time that we feel like have energy and have meaning, have potential impact. How do we sell them to the skeptic? That's always the last hurdle. Like the performance-oriented skeptic that's going to say, well, I have to sign off on that budget, and if you want X, I need to know why. How do you overcome that hurdle in your experience so you can tap the energy of that moment in time, but also satisfy the people that maybe don't share that same sentiment?
Ooh, that's hard. I mean, building trust is probably the number one thing, right? We have a close circle of brands and friendlies, right? That again, we think of kind of like guest stars, right? That's what we call like our clients, guest stars, kind of coming in and playing a role for a moment. But I think, not everybody who goes with you can come with you. And so you kind of have to be, ready to be in partnership. And sometimes people just aren't ready, and that's okay. There is someone out there who is.
I think it's about just like keep trying. I don't know if that's the most thoughtful answer, but what I mean by that is like, if you try one way, you open one door and that doesn't work, like continue to try another. I think that there's a million different like barriers to entry that sometimes we're not always directly aware of. And I think it's important to just like keep trying. And in that trying, you'll learn more about your audience and hopefully be able to ultimately be able to convince the skeptic because you learned what was holding them back in the first place.
Yeah, I think I would just echo what Jill said, and that you're not going to be able to get everybody. Yeah. You find your audience, find where your message resonates, and double down on that. That you can't be everything for everybody.
So trust, know your audience, and become the authority on the audience is what I'm hearing. How about you?
I would say prove it out. Like building trust is important, but create a proofing process and incubation test and learn scenario, and then come in and start small and then kind of build on top of that. You don't have to go with a massive kind of jump in full on launch all the time. Sometimes you do have to capitalize on the moment, but other times you can actually take a step back and say, okay, if there are going to be skeptics, why are they skeptical? They're skeptical for a reason. So and perhaps in that test and learn process they might be correct, and then you just completely abandon the situation and you move on to the next. And so I would say try and prove it as much as possible.
That's why I think it's so interesting, because everybody talks about the larger consultancies getting disrupted by AI, but they have all the case studies. And like, that's really the decisioning tool of business. Like, well, we have these case studies that say it's kind of worked out in the past. Like, all right, go ahead and do it. So I'm sorry, Justin, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I think just the difference between, converting the skeptic on the consumer or in your own org is it's a different process. I would agree with what Jake said in terms of starting small, test and learn, iterating, building, and then also you need that trust within your org, of course.
Well, I know we're about to wrap up. If there's one last piece of advice that you all could share with the audience based on your experience and what you've seen work, what would that be? I'll share. My father, who was in finance in the 80s, had a sign on his desk, and it says, "Never confuse brains with the bull market." He's a really smart guy. Because sometimes you're the genius, and sometimes you're just riding the wave. And I carried that with me my whole life. So I didn't know if you all had any similar advice on this topic.
I think a lot about, what we're chasing, whether it's hype or performance, is the outcome. And what we have control over are the conditions, right? And so not trying to chase the result. It's like a James Clear Atomic Habits thing, right? Like, don't worry about the goal. Worry about like, okay, well, what am I doing today about that? And making that incremental.
Stay creative and stay curious.
Yeah, I think in this massive AI hype cycle, I think you can't be afraid of it. You got to just jump in and keep trying stuff. That's the only way we're going to learn.
I'd say don't confuse attention with demand, and make sure that you're driving relevance to the brand, to the product, to something that actually makes sense for the consumer.
Well, thank you all so much for your time, and I hope everybody here got something out of this day. I thought it was great. Thank you all so much.